Over the past week, I've had more phone calls, emails, texts, and direct messages from friends, acquaintances, and colleagues than ever before in my life. The overwhelming theme of these conversations was the difficulty of white America to understand the depth and severity of racism. This is nothing new to me, as I've dealt with it my whole life. However, for certain people, it's as if the curtain has been pulled back to reveal a monster they never knew was there, or were simply willing to ignore. This week on the Social Studies show, I'd actually planned to interview Lesley Murphy, a travel blogger in the health and wellness field, to discuss influencer marketing and her life after The Bachelor. But in light of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor's deaths, we realized we had more important things to discuss in this pivotal moment. Together, we had an opportunity to reach a larger audience and share some of my experiences as a black man in America. Roles were reversed, and Lesley asked me the questions. The answers are my own, personal views. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit of a heavy heart being here. And to be completely honest, there's been a lot of activities this week that has kind of left me a little bit, I guess a little bit of adapted of what we're actually going to talk about. Honestly, just driving down here, there's still riots going on in LA. I've been sad about different people being killed. There's George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. It left me kind of feeling some kind of way. And to be completely honest, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to be here today. Like, I really just kind of wanted to lay in bed and watch Netflix. To be completely honest, I just didn't really I was like, am I in the space to talk about these kind of things? And one thing that's super interesting in kind of talking to you about this show, in what kind of actually really got me here, is we're at an influx in America where people don't really know what to do as far as interacting with race, how we can combat racism, what we can kind of do. And we had a really great conversation the other day, just talking about questions that you had of what you can do to be better, what you can do to actually talk to people about racism, how they can be preventative, how they can learn about minorities in different culture, and how you can actually reach that from your audience. And from talking about that and knowing from my personal experiences, maybe I can help you with that and actually be able to put a bigger, broader spread and kind of pull back the curtain of mysteriousness of racism. That's what brought me here today. I was I really kind of wanted to be here's an opportunity to talk to people, not people that just look like me, people that look like you. And I think for you to talk to people that look like me and not necessarily a particular audience, and be able to have a meeting of the minds and actually look at how we can actually do something collectively, purposefully, and then actually gain results. So that's basically what we're here to do today.
I'm excited now, and thank you for coming here.
No problem.
It's a heavy week for sure, and I think it's a movement. I think we're living through this next phase of this movement that is long overdue, and I have a ton of questions and educating myself to do. Thank you for being a part of that willingly, because I am sure you've had conversations at length.
Oh my God, it's been hours.
With so many people.
Yeah.
And it's not your job to educate anyone, really. I mean...
And it's a funny thing about it, because I actually want to touch on that, and it's kind of interesting because people don't really understand how, black people aren't saying that because they're insensitive, saying that it's not our job because of that. It just, here's the thing that's super interesting people don't necessarily think about, right? Black people already have their jobs that they go to, right? So then you already have racism on top of that. So then beyond that, we get done with your job of that. Then you got to go and trying to educate people there. And it's tiring. It's really exhausting. You're trying to explain to people, sometimes heated, sometimes calm, sometimes things. And it's emotionally draining because you're seeing our people being oppressed and killed and choked out and dead. And honestly, every time you go and explain that, you're reliving that. And the other thing about it, and I just thought about it too, is there's a certain sense of productivity lost because of just among black culture, right? So in the span of 4 days after the Ahmaud Arbery talking to him, I literally talked to 4 friends for probably an hour and a half to 2 hours. Think of that. So when you look at that, that's like 10 hours of talking in 4 days. Like I was exhausted. Like I literally just kind of was trying to explain to people. I was trying to be nice and trying to like show my point of view. Sorry. Yeah. But the other thing too is like, that's 8 to 10 hours of my life that I could have been doing something else. That I could have like been working on my business. I could have been talking to friends. I could have been relaxing. I could have been working on my mental health. I could have just trying to be zened out. And so when you're going and reliving each one of those moments, each time to that person, because that person has lived that experience, for me personally, I'm tired and exhausted because I've retold and explained and kind of do that. And like the reality to me, I feel like in 2020, there's enough resources for people to go out and learn these things on their own. There is Google. There are African American museums. There are books. There are great shows. Ava DuVernay has done great shows called 13th on Netflix. When they see us on Netflix, like start there. Like it's not a huge effort. You can sit on your couch. You can learn about it. It's like, but I think the whole thing about it is there's this stigma of being like, well, we don't want to learn about it. There's like a laziness, and that's the reality of like that is just like if I want to go and get a job, or if I want to go learn about something, or if I want to go be a part of some sort of production, I have to go learn and invest the time, right? By and large, white American culture does not want to go and invest the time on that. They want to reap the awards and love the songs and the dancing and performances, thing like that. But when it comes to actually really appreciating those things, they haven't found a way to do that yet.
Well, but I think all of your conversations definitely weren't in vain. I know it's not your job to do that, and I know that makes you exhausted, but thank you for doing that. And for me too.
Yeah,
I was part of that. I'm part of those 10 and a half hours.
Actually, you were 12 and 14.
Oh, man. Thank you. Thank you. I think it shows so much, and it helps in the long run, because at the end of the day, you gave me resources that then I went on to look into, and then that's a domino effect, because I just find more and more and more. And I think you're right, the root of it all. I think you need that innate curiosity that fuels your own education. I think this is an inside job just as much as it is an outside job of using your voice and amplifying your voice. It's really sitting with it and using your time to educate yourself, whether that's in books and Netflix series, in webinars where you can uplift the Black voices that you're learning from.
And there's great stories there.
Yeah.
There's great stories.
Yes. And so I think that's where it all starts, because I've gotten a lot of questions too on Kate, can you talk about your own journey with this and learning about this, because I don't know where to start. And it's like, well, I can definitely help you, but it's also personal work.
Well, I think the whole thing about that is by reading and watching and learning those stories, here's the thing that like Black people want. They want justice, they want humanity, they want opportunity. So all of a sudden, if you go and read those stories and like that, and then all of a sudden you make a connection with that, you understand that these people just want the same thing as anyone else.
Liberty
they want
and
the
justice,
same thing in that. Like,
liberty and justice for all. Like,
yeah. And
what
so
happened
that's a false narrative that's been told to Black people to help them buy in and help build this country. And so the whole thing about it is like you're helping and you're doing all this stuff and you're biding your time and you're being patient, thing like that. But then you're never ever seeing the rewards. That's where the frustration comes out. Or when like someone harms, like here's the whole thing, like super interesting, right? People have been talking about the rioting, right? How could they do this? They're not doing it the right way. They're doing it the wrong way. What should we do? But there's really there's no right way to protest, right? So let's look at this. Let's take it. Look, this is you. You're sitting there. You're watching your brother, sister, mother, lover life being snuffed out in front of you. and then someone's telling you how to react.
How to do it. Yeah.
How are you supposed to react to that? Don't react to this. Don't react that way. Don't be irrational. Don't think. But you just saw someone that deeply cares for you and someone you deeply care about, their life ended. Here's the funny thing about that people don't understand about like racism, like that. Every single black person that you know has encountered some sort of racism. Every single person. You can go like between indirect or direct. Being passed over for a job or being handcuffed to the hood of a police car. Every single black person you've ever encountered has dealt with racism. You can't say that about white people. And so that's the whole thing. And so when you start telling people how to live when they haven't encountered what we've encountered, it's super hypocritical.
I can understand that. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that who am I to tell anybody how to protest? But I'm just gonna let you speak to the protests because I think
No, I don't agree like with like that, but I mean like, but here's the whole thing, like, right? People are like, why are they doing this? I'm like, go arrest the other 3 officers.
Yeah,
like
right.
it's like, here's the whole thing. When did the protest start? Before they arrested the first guy. What are they protesting? Go arrest the guy that committed murder. You know, it's like, it's not rocket science here.
Absolutely not.
You know that? So it's like, literally, Black America is just asking for you to do what you would do for white America. Go arrest the person who perpetrated that. Still rioting after they arrest the first guy? Well, there's a videotape of 3 other guys with their knees on his back. Go arrest those people. After you get done with that, you know what you do? You go talk to Black community leaders. What can we do? How can we fix this? We realize that we made a mistake. Maybe build a council on oversight of police brutality. You make changes. Like, here's the whole thing. Like, they don't want to make changes. They said that this guy had 18 charges of police brutality. I'm like, how many times? Like, here's the funny thing that people like don't get, right? There's certain professions, right? Like, where you don't want to have like the okay person doing the job.
Right.
You don't want the okay pilot.
It's not this.
You don't want the okay heart doctor. You don't want the okay engineer or architect for your house, right?
Right.
So you're going to let people with guns who are supposed to actually go and regulate and take care of the community go out there with substandard training. Like, think about that. Good enough. Here's your gun and clip. Go for it.
Well, I think, I mean, there's got to be,
Like,
I don't want to blanket that because there's got to be like really great law enforcement officers out there.
I'm sure there are. There are.
Some
I'm just
bad apples in that.
I'm
though.
just saying, there's good pilots
For sure.
and there's bad pilots.
For sure.
That have crashed into the mountain and they're thing. Or there's doctors and there's doctors who have done malpractice. But I'm just saying, like, think about how much training pilots or doctors have to get the certification for their board.
And I don't know anything about training for law enforcement officers.
I mean, here's the whole thing. It goes very ways. Like, they have officer tests, I'm pretty sure. But I mean, like, there's obviously officers who have legal degrees and probably have master's degrees in it. So it's all across the board, right? But you think to a certain point of people that are police and the police have armed weapons, they are there to help. They're there to preserve life.
That's not what happened.
Like, it's like if you're there to preserve life,
Right.
like, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. Like basically, like, if you go to a bank robbery, they stop the bank robbery. If you go to a mall shooting, they stop the mall shooter. They're there to preserve life. So all of a sudden, you have these people who are definitely taking this oath and this code of conduct, and they're not there to preserve life. So something is wrong with the training program in there somewhere.
Absolutely.
So that's what it is. And so, like, again, it comes down to like basics, preserve life. These people are not preserving life. We've got a problem here.
The training process or racism.
Again,
I mean,
well, the whole thing about the training process, you should be able to identify racism. Yeah, there should be some mental health screening, you know? Because otherwise, the problem is going to perpetuate.
Absolutely.
If you can't screen the racism of the training, then that person shouldn't have that job.
Absolutely.
So that's, I think, comes into part of
Hand in hand.
Yeah. So you just have to do it, and like that's the reality of those things of like they have to see.
And some things can go unseen though.
But I'm just saying, but you have to see life equally across the board, across all races. This Asian person's life matters. This Native American's life person's matters. This African American's life matters. This Indian person matters. And so if they're having a thing where their scale is like that, then how are they going to preserve life when all those people are in a building?
They don't need to be.
They're going to be selective.
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
like the whole thing of that. So that in itself creates a problem.
And thank you for having an hour-long conversation with me 5 days ago. But since then, I've learned a lot as well.
Well, and again, I think that comes down to what you are and who you are as a person, and like that's where the people and the allies come in, is having a curious nature about other people. Yeah. And if you don't have a curious nature about other people, if you are afraid, if you are taught fear from your parents and things like that, that is where racism develops. So the best thing you can do for yourself, for your children, for your friends like that, is have a curious nature and be wanting to know and learn everything you can about different types of people, different types of cultures, different types of places, things like that, and then try and be the best person you can be.
And I think that's exactly where we start, because I think so many people are saying, what can we do? I don't know where to start. Like, what do we do? And let me just say that the starting should have taken place a long time ago.
I mean, it already has started. Like, it has. It just, here's the whole thing. Like, it's like the water boy. Like we run the mile and like a couple of people did a couple laps and then they kind of just took over to the bench and like took a hot second of that. We're like, really, the black people are rest out here. We're like, we still got a marathon to go. We got to go.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's like, it's not, I think a lot of people look at it like a checkbox.
Yeah.
Like, let's post some stuff, let's say some stuff, and then, oh, we're an ally. Yay, we're done.
And that's the problem, actually, the thing about it. And like, that's the whole, the validation. That's the hard part, because that's what people want to get for helping. They want some sort of validation, right? And the tough thing about like that and actually combating racism is you're not always going to get validation.
Yeah.
You're not always going to feel like that. You're not always going to have a happy reward like that. Things are going to happen that are bad. People are going to go to jail. People are going to die. People are going to get their feelings hurt. Like there's going to be destruction. But then also from that will become a rebirth and like that and like a building and a learning and accepting process. And so the whole thing that's super hard for people with dealing with racism, they're so afraid of watching, like it's like Jenga. Like it's like if you pull that one thing and like it falls, like oh my god, it's like it's gonna be mass destruction of the thing. But the thing about it is like pushing forward comes from failure. You know?
And I think it's so important. That's why I think it's so important to just speak, even if you don't know anything as a white person. Like even if you don't feel like you can speak to this topic, if you are anti-racist, then talk about it. And when you say something wrong, somebody will correct you, and that is where the learning is.
And then apologize for it.
And apologize for it.
You know, like just say sorry, and like you'd be surprised how many times people will be like, "Okay, got it." You know, but like here's the whole thing: people have such a hard time saying like, "Dang, I messed up. Sorry." For
sure, absolutely, and I think everybody needs to work on that. But I think the root of it is a lot of people are just scared to say anything because they're scared they're going to say the wrong thing.
Yeah, sure.
So I think just say what's on your heart. You're going to mess up. I've messed up, but that's where the learning is.
Okay, so I've got a question for you. Where have you messed up?
I've messed up a few times.
Okay, let's hear it.
I have messed up. The first one that comes to mind was a few years back when I was traveling in South Africa.
Okay.
And I was on a trip with Johnson & Johnson, and we were learning about what they were doing with HIV work in the area. And we were taking a bunch of photos. We were around women who had HIV, and Johnson & Johnson had come out with this amazing medical miracle that where HIV positive women were able to have HIV negative babies. And we were meeting women in South Africa in their homes, nice enough to let us in their homes, and there was a photographer there. I posted about it and was immediately reprimanded by a few accounts. And at first it was so triggering because I mean, it's like, yeah, I'm here with a brand who is teaching me about this stuff, but there's so much learning in that experience because I learned that I was putting myself in the center of that, where it's not my story to tell. I mean, it's their story. I'm facilitating, sharing it with the world. But what was wrong with those photos was I was in the center of them, each and every one. It was a carousel. There I am, there I am, there I am with this mother and her child, when it should be really centering around them. And so super triggered. It was the first time I had to like really sit with this backlash as it pertained to race, and went back and forth with this account for a little bit, and didn't really take it into heart that day. I mean, I think it takes sitting with something and like letting it process, letting it resonate before you learn anything.
Yeah, like I think people want to lash out quickly, and sometimes it takes that presence of mind of sitting with it, realizing what's the problem here, what am I doing wrong, what can I correct that path, what can I do to make it better for everyone involved.
And I was really lucky because this account did it in the most beautiful, calming way from an educational standpoint. Like, they weren't angry. They were just, it was like they were sitting me down and saying, hey, thanks for this, but this is what's wrong about it. And so I was still quick to get defensive because it didn't have to be nice or mean. It was just, hey, this isn't, it just wasn't praised. That's all. And so then that's where the defense came in. But I mean, I was completely in the wrong. I realize that now. So that was one instance. And I know that, you know, if it's somebody else's story, tell it from their perspective.
Yeah, or just give them the wide breadth and kind of like, I don't know, it's like interesting being a camera person and kind of being able to key in on a person and then let them tell a story. And then also like developing that story around them. And maybe you're a part of it or you're an intersection of that. And like what's interesting with that is like how you could have told that narrative of like, this is what it's like for me. And I don't know, I mean, I wasn't there, but these are the things that are shocking or new to me coming from where I'm coming from. And this is what you can do, and this is what's happening here, and these are some things I didn't know about, rather than being like, here's a photo of me, check me out.
Yeah.
Something like that. So
yeah, I don't even think, it wasn't even the caption. It was definitely the photo. And it wasn't just one photo. It was a carousel. So it was just like, me. It's not about me.
Yeah, and I think it's just sometimes in that thing, it's just like it's just showing the work that's being done.
Yeah.
And like in that, and like that's the beauty of that thing, of something like that, of them kind of bringing you in for as an influencer of that, is like they're looking for you. Just like people seeing the photos, that's your audience, and that's like they don't necessarily need to see you in the photos to be the audience.
Yes.
And it's like, and that outreach might help those people understand, kind of thing like that, because they're not exposed to it. So it's just like it's like us getting a telegram from the North Pole and like them telling us a story. Like, we're not there, I'm like there, but they're telling us an interesting story, and we're like, oh, so this is what's going on at the North Pole. And then you're just kind of like, you're the medium.
You're really good at analogies. Remember I told you that?
I got some great ones.
It's just like you have one for everything, and I'm like, yes, you just break it down. It's good.
Okay, so let's switch to another one. So Lesley, you've been saying that you've been struggling about figuring out what to do from seeing all the different things on there and having a bit of conflicting as far as like, I don't know if it's necessarily like guilt about not necessarily doing enough, or identifying where you can help out or what you can actually do to be an ally. And so I kind of wanted to give you a few examples of people, one, who helped me on this program and throughout my life that have kind of like helped me, and also I think that are great examples of that. Like a good one that I would say is like when I first moved down here, my friend, his name is JJ Thomas. He's actually Shaun White's halfpipe coach for the last Olympics. He's a good friend of mine in the span that we worked together in snowboard. When he was a professional snowboarder, he worked really hard to see about getting one of his companies to employ me to shoot photos of him for that season. And so when you see someone like that and they see you and they see your talents and they fight to get you hired, to get you paid, to actually have your voice implemented across a thing, across an advertising campaign, invite you into their life. Like when I first moved down here, him and his family, they were the only people I really knew. They lived down in San Diego. They would invite me down for holidays. Anytime I was like alone or like just getting settled in, they would invite me down. They would take me in. Like his mom, Susan, and his Bob, his stepdad, they would have me for Thanksgiving. Like it was like they'd have me for Christmas. Like it was funny. Like sometimes I'd be here by myself and they would go and they'd make these like, they'd get little presents that they could tell they just like, they were like totally just like makeshift. They like, oh, Stan's coming down thing. But they just made sure that I had presents, you know, and things like that. And so, like when people treat you like family, they see. So I'm gratefully indebted to someone like JJ who like, he doesn't post much. He's not like, oh my God, like that. But he's invited me into his home. He's treated me like family. He's had me down and like, and also helped me with my career. That's a person like that I consider an ally for seeing me who I am. On the show, I have 3 people that work with me and then a couple different mentors. I have John Strivey, who's the graphic designer, and he does all the different logos and things like that in Colorado. I have Brandon Peak, he's the web designer. He is in Colorado. Both of those guys are white. Like I told them I had an idea about what I wanted to do for this show, and they were jumped on board. Like, how can we help? What can we do with their talents and that? And it's like, they are some of the best people I know. There's different other people, but at the time, who could fulfill the job and help me out? Those guys, and they jumped in, and like, they're not paid. My other friend of mine, Jeff Mustache, he is in Atlanta right now. He's gone around, flying around with me, doing the filming, doing the editing. He's the one who edits the shows. Like that. It's funny because he's white. He's married to a black woman and they have an interracial baby. So he's got a different stake in the game, and he understands that something like this, building this, is building on his child's future. I think of that. And none of us are paid for this.
Wow.
We all do this on our free time, like in between our free time, because we see that we need to create a space for different types of people, different minorities, to be able to learn about advertising, to be able to learn about activism, and be able to talk to experts that they wouldn't have access to, and to be able to learn from.
Yeah.
And so, like, if I had something like this as a kid where I could actually go and see and talk to different experts and figure out how to go and get my message and get my brand narrative and like what I need to do for advertising and how I can have my story be authentic, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to prepare the. So look at that as far as like that. People who are putting in the work and like that. And I think like it doesn't necessarily mean that like you've got to come and join on that, but I think like you can look around things. Find people who help, might need a little opportunity, might need a little push, just maybe a little support. And that's what you gotta do. And I'm thinking it's not a big thing. You can start small, but just like sometimes that small thing really helps people in a big way.
I think allyship and the word ally has really caught on in the past week. And a lot of people are using it and they just want to know how to do so. So I think you left a lot of actionable items there.
Yeah.
In order to be that. And I think just looking around, looking at who you follow on Instagram, looking at your friend group, and diversifying those two bubbles so that you can feel and not feel either too scared that you just don't, or comfortable conversation, just that back and forth, because you're not around whiteness all the time, you know.
And I think the thing that's like a tough for people and like that. A lot of people want the hug. A lot of people want the pat on the back. I'm not really the hugger. I want to see what you can do.
I like it.
I want to see where you're going to, like, I've been working hard my whole life. I've been working my ass off. So I want to see when you're going to come and jump in here with me and work hard and work your ass off. I don't need a pat on the back. I don't want a hug. To be completely honest.
Action.
Like,
I love it. I love it.
It's just really like, it's not my thing.
Yep.
Like, show me, like, thing, because I will work just as hard or harder than anyone, and I've had to for my career, thing of that. Just show me that you're ready to jump in and work as hard as I am.
So, and to show you, I mean, that can be so many different things. If people want to post on social media, to use their voice, that's one thing. They have to do the inner work to read the books, to educate themselves, and that's another thing. But what about putting their money where their mouth is? Like, what about donating, and to who?
I mean, I think here's another little interesting thing about putting your money where your mouth is. I'm like, kind of like, it kind of goes in my notes, something like that. A lot of that goes into creating positions of power for minorities. You know, it's like, I've looked at just recently, like Netflix and Amazon, and they're talking about how they're supporting this movement, right? Where are the black execs? Where are those positions of power? What are the shows that they're making? And they're doing them. Like, a lot of them are doing, like, I mean, Netflix has just created that Black AF with Kenya Barris. Yeah. And so they're telling those stories, and they really are, like, you know, like, and that's where I look at that, and I'm like, look at that, I'm like, that's who I want to work for.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do with. They're trying to create different places and landscapes, and like, that comes back to the storytelling. If you can watch these shows and learn about minorities, you can learn about things. There's great documentaries. I mean, like, it's like that. It's like the Jordan documentary just came out, and like, you can learn about that. So that's ESPN putting money into actionable items of storytelling like that. And like, that's where people are like, they can come to a love of Jordan, buying Nikes if they want to, and that. And so that's where the thing where people, I think they miss the whole idea of like, you're not going to lose out in profits or in equality by investing in those things. If anything, you might gain more back because you gain a bigger audience. You gain a bigger following. You get people more interested in your brand. And so I think people like are so afraid because they don't know anything about those other different cultures, different minorities. They're like, I want to shy away from, I don't know. It's like, you're talking about being scared. I'm scared.
Which goes back to diversification.
Yeah, but if you have someone working in there, if you have someone working in that office and like, here's where I can help you with that. Yeah. Here's how we can tell that authentic story. Here's how we can shoot that authentic photo. Here's how we can make that authentic video, and then your narrative is authentic all the way through, and you get to capitalize on it with your brand.
Do you have any specific examples of past clients or past jobs that come to mind with?
I just recently did a Coca-Cola shoot for Black History Month.
Okay.
And they specifically hired me because they felt like I had an authentic voice that spoke to Black people for that history, and I've lived it, and I had an interesting approach about how I wanted to have those people represented. Because here's the funny thing, right? When you are that person and you see how you want to be represented, that's the photo you take, right? Another interesting thing is I worked with another friend of mine. He's a creative director, and he hired me for an Edmunds car shoot, actually a couple, and like that. And it's funny because it wasn't per se, I'd say, super multicultural like that, but that's the interesting thing of someone taking a Black person and being able to put them into a narrative that's not necessarily multicultural. It's like, you can market for other brands, other people, other type of things. That sometimes the thing about it is they get pigeonholed of like, bring in the black photographer to advertise the black thing. And it's like, I'm like, you can advertise, I can advertise white things too. Like it's like, I've been around my whole life. It's not like something like new to me. You know, like I know how to shoot those too. And so him taking that initiative to go and hire me, that's an ally, you know, like because he sees my talent, he's putting his job on the line for me to go and do my job. And that's the funny thing that people don't really understand. I understand when I'm on those sets and I'm on those things, like all these people are dependent on me, and I take it super seriously. I take it super seriously. Like every job I go and do, it's got to be the best job I've done up to that point, every single time.
I'm just over here thinking about ways I can amplify that in my own life, and be an ally as it relates to.
Well, I'll tell you a way that you're talking about. We were talking about this the other day in your, when we were discussing the show. You were talking about you're getting ready to go to do a trip to Moab, and you have a winner from your blog contest that you're bringing along that's a minority. And I think that's a very telling point, because people don't understand, by you creating that space, creating that contest, creating a safe space for that minority. Like obviously minorities are like scared as hell in the outdoors because you can't go bird watching, you can't go running. All of a sudden you creating that space right there gives this minority a magical experience that she might be afraid to go do by herself. She might be afraid to go and venture out to. And that's where like maybe you don't see it, but that is being an ally. And that is like putting yourself out there to give this person a safe space to experience something new and beautiful, and then she can take it back to her culture and have them experience it in a different way. And so it's maybe like you haven't even thought about it to that level, but that's what's going on.
Yeah, I like the domino effect there, and I think that I just want to help normalize bringing minorities into the outdoors. I recently read this week on why I saw a chain of people going back and forth on why that is, like why minorities aren't really, their presence isn't seen in the outdoors. And on one hand, somebody says, oh, it's a race thing. On the other hand, somebody's like, actually, I'm black and it's more of a culture thing. Like I try and get my friends to go with me, but they just like, they think it's a white person's activity and they just don't like it.
But why is that though?
Yeah. And
it's like that's all there's your systematic racism. Yes. That's a white people's thing. Why is it a white thing? Because here's the whole thing. When's the last time you saw a black person on the cover outside?
Maybe never.
Crickets.
Yeah.
Crickets.
Cricket, tumbleweeds.
Okay. Why is that black person going to think that it's a white person's thing? There you go.
Yeah.
Like that, because it's advertised that way. It's advertised that way. So I'll tell you, because here's the funny thing, right? I grew up in Alaska. I went to school in Montana. I did a lot of ski and snowboard photography. That was where I started my career. The index to outdoors for most things of like sports, skiing and snowboarding is super expensive. Yep. So it's an sport. So that's what hard thing that. It's like if you want to compare it, it's like look at Lewis Hamilton for F1 racing. Aren't a lot of like black people in racing. It's an expensive elitist sport. Yep. So you have to look at ways of how you're going to challenge that and then get those people outdoors. So there's that, like that, because just the barrier of entry is really hard.
Absolutely.
Like hiking, running, not so much. So that's where you can see a little bit, and you see more brands diving into that. Skiing, snowboard, non-existent. Like it's really hard. The second thing is black people go in the outdoors and they get vibed. They get vibed by people. I've gone surfing and I've had people on the water say stuff to me like, what are you doing out here? Like you've had stuff where they talk about like people going on hikes and park rangers, straight up telling black people, what are you doing out here? I saw Super did this amazing commercial that they advertised on the Do Tour. And one of the comments below was like, black people don't camp. Like this person, 2019, straight up posted that. Like black people don't camp. What are they doing in the outdoors? Like with his name, like right there, you could see it. Like I have shots of it. And you're just like, what are you doing? Like, I literally had to like him back and like, actually, you're just hanging around the wrong people. Like, there's plenty of black people who love going in the outdoors and stuff. Like, you can go down, like, I honestly have been surprised. You can go down to Redondo. There's so many people out riding their bikes now. And it's like, it gives me joy seeing other minorities getting out there and doing things where, like, for a lot of times, a lot of places, I'm the only one. And it's a lonely place to be sometimes.
I bet.
Where I really love and enjoy the outdoors. But there is that barrier entry. It's like you got to buy this equipment. You've got to get outside. Like, it's just like you have to drive somewhere. You know, a lot of people don't have access to get outside of their neighborhood. Like, you know, it's like you got to have a car, you got to have a tent, you got to have a sleeping bag, like that. You can go to different places, but that's the thing. And also, is a very big thing that my friend, one of my mentors, Arturo, was saying. It's like you have to see it to be it. And so if they're not advertising it, if you're not looking at outside brands, going and actively promoting, actively using minorities, thing like that, how it's like, think about how many interesting like Instagram posts where it's like the tiny person and the big scene like that.
Yep.
How many of those have you seen of black people?
Not a lot.
Okay.
So what brands do you think are getting it right in the outdoor space?
I would say Aria has been doing a good job. They've been looking at their catalogs and like some of their print materials and stuff that they do. They've been doing good stuff. I would say North Face has been doing a good job. They've been using a lot of different like promo stuff for the fit models and stuff on their website. I would say Columbia, where I've worked with them, and they definitely have a task to try and go about bringing more people in the outdoors and telling more of those stories. So off the top of my head, those are probably like the three, you know? I mean, I think Nike does a good job, obviously. I mean, like it's like a thing, but it's more sports, not necessarily like outdoors. Like, I mean, I can't think of any tent company that's running an ad with.
No, neither.
But
one
who
that
knows?
comes to mind is Hoka. You know the running shoe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're great with bringing in, like, I mean, so many different races,
Mm-hmm.
and highlighting their stories, highlighting their training. Backcountry, it's okay. I wasn't giving them a ton of praise, but yeah, it kind of ends there. Yeah.
I mean, like, it's just
I
like,
can't
again, I'll
really-
just put it at that. When's the last time you saw a black person on the cover of Outside? And like, if you have to think that hard about it, then that's not really doing that great of a job.
Right. Nope.
Okay. So there's people who obviously identify very well with their African American culture, right? And then there are people like, it's kind of like as of late, it's kind of taken a little bit more of a turn of like the term black. And here's the interesting thing about that, and I would probably say for myself, I probably go more as black because like realistically, like I identify myself more as American than African American. So like realistically, like, you know, it's like if you're not African from America, you're just American. Like, so I'm black, you know, think of that. But I'll tell you why. So when you think about like, what's your ancestry?
I come from Hungary and Germany.
Okay. Have you gone and visited your homeland?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you know all of that, or your ancestors and things like that? Okay. So now take that, think about this. All of a sudden I was rounded up from a tribe, put on a boat, shipped over to America, sold off, given a slave name, family split up again, disseminated across that. So then all of a sudden, you're given the slave master's name.
Yeah.
So do you know where the hell you came from?
No.
Okay, so that's where for me, like I'm like, honestly, I've been so diluted from all that different things of like going back. Like,
Makes sense.
I could get into it, but honestly, here's the whole thing. I'm probably a little bit of a difference for me than that. I'm more focused on the future and the future that I can bring to my potential kids and my family than trying to go back than that, because like that history has just been dealt with, you know? Like, I feel like it's kind of thing, I'm like, I know there's different roots like that, but realistically, at the day and age of like that, like Evans is probably like some slave master's name that I was given.
And it's so interesting to hear your take on that.
You know? And so, like, why don't, like, I don't even know what that is.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
You know? And so, like, the only one I identify is, like, my dad's name because I'm the second. So I identify more with Stanley, which, again, I mean, I might as well just, like, that's definitely not African American. You know? So, like, I, like, literally think about it, and, like, literally, like, I mean, I'll tell you a funny story, right? And here's the thing about and how I've come to that notion. So after Black Panther came out, right? Like, everyone was super Wakanda forever. Like, people were feeling it. I was feeling it. I was like just all up on it, right? So I was out in Hollywood one day, and I stopped at Trejo's Tacos and got like two Taco Tuesday. And there's some black people in there. I just happened to be sitting next to the bar, and then we're talking about it, and we're having the story, and like everyone's feeling it, you know, and think of that. And he's just like, yeah, did you see Black Panther? And I'm like, yeah. And he's just like, Wakanda forever. And I'm like, yeah. And, you know, and he's just like, do you hear that they're like doing reparations in Africa? And I'm like, yeah, you know. And he's just like, so like there's a piece of the farmland and stuff like that. And like, we can go back and reclaim our farmlands. And I was just like, that's where I was like,
You lost me.
I was like, that's going to be a no, dog, because, like, honestly, I worked 20 years really hard at my craft of becoming a photographer and living in America. Like, I wouldn't know the first thing. Like, if you put me in a farmland in Africa right now, I have no idea what I'd do. I'd just be like, you know? So, it's just like, I was like, so it's funny, and he was, like, legitimately kind of, like, pissed, but I was just like, but I had to, like, break it down for him. I'm just like, dude, I've been working my whole life to become a photographer. I'm not just about to go give that up and try and become a farmer in Africa right now. I'm sorry. And he was just kind of like,
it's like, no, man, let's stand together.
I was like, oh, it's going to be a pass, bro. But
well, it's interesting you say that, because when you talk about that, I immediately think of farmland in the South. and where I grew up, because I mean that's kind of where it all started too, is bringing slaves over, making them work in the cotton plantation. I grew up in Arkansas, where my high school mascot was Johnny Reb, a Confederate soldier. Like,
oh my God.
And our fight song was to the tune of Dixie, basically the unofficial anthem of the Confederacy. And at the time, I think back on that, and now I'm mind blown that we only changed that mascot 5 years ago. I graduated from high school in 2006.
So, I mean, again, like,
when
you see, like, it's like funny because when you're talking about it, I'm like, oh my God, how does this like week make you feel like that? Like, we've seen it all along.
Yep.
Like, it's not anything that's nothing new. All of a sudden, just like it just pointed out to you, and like, oh, I mean, there's still people driving around with Confederate flags on their car.
In my hometown.
Yeah, I'm like, that's the kind of things that makes me like afraid for my life. I'm like, okay.
And I'm learning all of this, and I'm like taking a walk in your shoes, and thank you for that.
You're still living, like, it's like, here's the whole thing, we're in California, right? So in this nature, in this whole zone like that, like, there's no Civil War battlefields.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing of like, when I lived in Utah, I dated this Jack Mormon girl, thing of that. And at the time, I think it was either, I don't know, there was some sort of outbreak in the Middle East, right? And she started talking about Middle East people as being savages and this and that, and going on and just going off about these people, right? And I was like, did you ever think about Islam and think about, there's this thing called the Crusades? And the reason those people in the Middle East feel that way is because Christians came there to try and convert Islamic people and slaughtered them wholesale till the streets ran with blood. Like, straight up, you can read books about like till the streets ran with blood, or like that. No mercy, women, children, thing like that, plunder, thing like that. And they're like, convert to Christianity or else. And so you look at the things now, and you look at kind of like relations between the Middle East and America and stuff like that, and why it still is in those people's hearts so much, because they still live there. Like, you have to think about like, Imagine you walk by this building or this house or this home or the city where your great 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 grandmother was slaughtered. So think about that person or your parents telling their child that story and passing that story on. Every time you walk past that building, that's where your great grandmother was slaughtered. So it just prolongs that hate there, right? So now think about that for the South. So you've got all these battlefields, you've got crazy Southern pride, you've got crazy Southern culture right
Old
there.
South, yeah.
There. And so every single thing that you pass by is like a battlefield landmark, a thing like that, where they are reliving it, and that is their pride of where maybe they won this battle, or they lost this battle, or someone's great 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 grandpappy was killed, or great great grandpappy won this battle here, and like that. And so all they're doing is just perpetuating that story every time they drive past that place or that point. So that is why racism in Southern like culture is so prevalent, because they reinforce it. Like they can be down and out and like maybe not have done a thing, but this one time in this one place in the past, our plantation owned these slaves, so that's how we feel about black people.
Judge Parker was known as a heinous judge in Fort Smith, Arkansas, where I grew up. And Judge Parker's courthouse still stands today, where you have to pay money to get into it. So it even prolongs that racism and for monetary gain. And you can go see the gallows, where black people were lynched time after time after time from this heinous judge back in the early 1900s, and it's awful. It still stands.
Have you seen, I'm not sure where it is, but it is the African American I can't remember the name of it, but it's a prominent museum, and what it has is it has all these slats of the African Americans, so it looks like basically, as far as like it's a representation of the hangings and lynchings.
I think I know what you're talking about.
And like I think, but it's like it's such a thing when you actually realize what the representation means. It is awe staggering, and just it's such a beautiful thing. But
I know what you're talking about.
But it gives lynching a visceral and visual feel, because you realize all these bodies hanging represent bodies of the past hanging in the South. And so that's the thing when I talk about people going I'm like, they can go learn. They can go to those museums. There is an African American museum, Smithsonian, in DC that I used to go to as a kid. There are all types of learning places about, and that's where I'm talking about, where people don't go because...
But that begs the question, do you think it's... Do you agree with them being institutions for learning in history, or do you think it just perpetuates the idea of racism? That
I mean, honestly, here's the thing, personal feeling, like the gallows of that judge place, I would burn to the ground. Because it just, we don't need to see that anymore.
No.
Think of that. I think of that, but again, I'm not there, and that's just my own personal feeling, because it's like if you go and leave that thing, if you have these Confederate statues, you have these journals of horses, like it's like you lost.
I know.
Like it's like a thing, and like it's just like you don't get to hang the rafters from the banners when you lost. You lost. Like it's like that's where the other team comes and puts up their jerseys and things like that. I'm like, we won. This is how it is. Like thing of that.
But I will say there's also a museum as at the same time where with relics and stories, and so I don't know. I don't know what side to go on.
Again, I think there are parts of history because people need to know the horrors of history, you know? And it's like, I think an interesting, and again, I don't know the narrative because I've never been to the one that you're talking about, but when you think about something like the Holocaust Museum, or you think about the Vietnam Memorial Wall, or you go to the 9/11 Memorial Wall, those places are awe-inspiring in the suffering and loss that went in those places, and I feel that when I go there, but I don't look at those as perpetuating. I don't look at the 9/11 Memorial as perpetuating terrorism.
Sure.
I look at that as a memorialization to those people that lost their lives in a tragic act, but it gives it's a visual representation of the loss that went on there.
Yeah. Yeah. I just case by case basis, I guess, and what the real root of it's there for.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, like, when you're talking about like what it costs to get in there, like, where does that money go? If it's going to support David Duke, no. You know, like, yeah, I'm not with it. There you go.
Oh my God. Yeah, I get it. Case by case basis. What was it? Because that's kind of, I mean, there's way more to that story in my childhood, and those symbolisms will always be woven into the fabrics of my childhood, which is embarrassing in a sense to even come out with and say. But
also, here's the positive side of that. Think about all those crazy, weird, racist situations that you had as far as influences. Like, think about that. Like, it's like you're this little child right here, and all those influences right there, right? And then you manage to get out of that and become more progressive and learn thing of that. So that's the thing where, like, you're looking at it one way, but I look at it, I'm like, there is hope. If you can come from that and turn it into this and be where you are now and like actually be curious about things, then here's the whole thing. Like, it's like, that's the whole thing of like, when they talk about racism being taught, you're in the hotbed of teaching racism. So if you got out and like learned and then like aren't racist, well, I guess racism can be unlearned too. You
Absolutely.
know, and so you gotta like look at it like that, and like I think that's where you gotta try and keep the positives, you know. And I think like that's the thing where I think of like that's the thing I think that's interesting where people don't index on the atrocities that Black people have dealt with time and time again in America. And you like think about it, and like you think about all the things that have happened to them, all the things like segregation, like less pay for jobs, less opportunities, thing of that. Like we've time and time again turned the other cheek, been better, been more resilient, been forgiving, thing like that.
You seem exhausted too.
And
you just took a big exhale, like
no,
you're carrying this big weight.
So you look at that, and I think people don't understand how much of like when people are like looking at the frustrations now and looking at the rioting, like those people have carried that for so long. And like when you have these spillover, like the 1968 riots or Rodney King or anything like that, that's just when like a point when like Black people have gotten fed up.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing about like, it's like the George Floyd, that was just like someone just filled up the tender box and like that was the match, you know. Like, and it's just like it's like I look at it this way, and like, and it's where I kind of like think when I get stressed out or filled up and think that all of a sudden a cup has a finite part where it's filled like that, but if you keep pouring things into it and keep pouring things out, it's gonna spill over and make a mess.
And that was George Floyd.
Yeah, I think George Floyd was the part that was just like the cup was just full.
For sure.
You know, like it was just full. Like you got Ahmaud, you got Breonna, you got Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper, you've got COVID, you've got face masks. I mean, like people aren't even like, it's like interesting because the whole thing, like the face mask thing, it's a whole another thing I could go into.
Yeah.
Right? So here's the thing of like that, and like looking at that as for myself as a Black man and dealing with COVID, think of that, right? All of a sudden they're like, don't wear face masks. Then they're like, do wear face masks. Do wear homemade face masks. Wear face mask mandatory. But then you've got underlying racism across the board. So it's funny because like when it came across on the first thing I ordered, my mom was like, Stan, are you wearing your face mask? And I'm like, sometimes, Mom. And I was just like, she's like, what do you mean? You gotta be wearing it all the time. And I was like, Mom, here's the thing you kind of gotta think about, right? I'm a 6'2", 230-pound Black man. Think about, like, you know, you're like, she's telling me to wear a homemade mask. Think about me wandering into a bank wearing a homemade mask. Like, that's not the best option for me right now.
That makes my...
It's like, here's the thing. Like, think about going to a gas station and paying a gas station attendant at night. Like, the chances are of someone with subversive racism, calling the cops on me, and getting shot while I'm just minding my business because I'm supposed to be like protecting myself from COVID. I literally have to make a mental decision of like, do I want to get shot or do I want to get COVID?
And you know what? That is entirely possible.
And that's the whole thing. And my thing is literally is like, I'd rather take the hit on COVID or someone saying something to me about it. Like, you know, again, when I'm with people, because here's the whole thing, when I'm with people, there's a witness, right? But when I'm by myself, it's scary because it's my word against whoever perpetrated that against me. And that's where the Amy Coopers come in. If I don't have my camera, if I get out without the car without my phone, it's their word against mine. So my whole thing about it is I have to ration out. I'm like, I'll have one. I'll keep a mask or I'll keep one on me, anything like that. But it's easier for me to walk without one and disarm someone with a smile than it is to have a mask and have them call the cops on me and get potentially shot.
Well, you have a nice smile, so don't stop smiling.
Okay, I'll try not to.
But I mean, it's honestly.
But it's funny because my mom was like, you got a good point there. Just use your best judgment. And this is like my mom. My mom's like straight up calling me. Like literally, like, here's the whole thing where people like don't understand. Like my mom yesterday called me and she's like, Stan, stay home. Don't go on the rides. Did your mom call you and tell you not to go on the rides?
Go out on, yeah. She did.
Okay, good. Your mom.
Yeah.
So,
I've
your
marched,
mom call you?
I've marched in protest before, but.
Did your mom tell you not to go on rides?
They were worried about me. They're like, what are you doing going out taking pictures?
But this is after they'd already seen it, right? They didn't call you beforehand.
No.
Or did they? Okay, I was just curious.
I mean, going back to
poll in the audience.
I don't even think twice wearing a mask because I don't even have to think about that.
Well, that's the thing.
So
as a white woman hearing you talk about this, I am taken aback because I don't have to think about that, and that is
literally. So that's where like I've had a couple friends call me and ask me, and they're like, "Are you wearing a mask all the time?" And I'm like, "Not all the time." And I was like, funny because I've had two different friends. They start to lay in, and then I explain. They're like, "Oh," and I'm like, "That's the thing of like you don't know where I'm coming from, and you're not listening, and all of a sudden you know everything." And I'm like, let me just finish my sentence, and then I tell you because this is what I'm facing, and then they're like, oh, but here's the funny thing about, like, and this is where like the systematic racism comes into effect. It's like, definitely black people are tired of white people telling them how to solve the problem.
I bet.
Like, it's just like so exhausting.
I bet.
Like, it's so annoying because everyone it's like again, and that's where I get into what we're talking about of hip hop is the poetry of Black America, right? Just because you've heard about it, just because you've listened to it, doesn't mean you've lived it, you know? And like that's the hard part where like if you're surrounded by it and you listen to the music and you go to concerts, thinking about like it's easy enough and you got the shoes, you know, you're buying the thing, you're like going to the sneakerhead shops, like you're deep into black culture, right? But the difference is if you go lined up in a police lineup, thing like that, I am still going to get called black and you're going to get called white, even though depending on what you know and your knowledge and what you're wearing and things like that, they're still going to profile me.
Speaking of, do you practice what you say if you got pulled over? Like, do you?
Oh yeah, I mean like the talk.
Yeah.
You're like running about the talk?
Yeah.
Again, like my parents had the talk like from the get-go.
Really?
You know, like literally like, I mean, from jump, like, you know, like this means like, my dad is in the Army and my mom's a school teacher and like literally they just had incidents. I mean, like it's just one of those things where like, I mean, racism is real and like that can get you dead. Like it can get you dead by making the wrong mistake at the wrong time. Like, and that's the difference between like people don't understand. I make a wrong mistake, I'm dead.
Yeah.
You know? And so my parents like had the very thing of talk of like, always have your license, always have your registration, don't make any sudden moves. Yes, sir, no, sir, hands on the wheel. Like, definitely, sir, and like explaining, like, and like just being very respectful. Thinking that, diffuse.
Wow.
Diffuse the situation, you know, as much as you can because all you need to do is make some hasty move. Or you're ill prepared, or you're nervous, or you're scared, or anything like that. You could be reaching for your license too quickly. You can open the glove compartment too quickly. Like, don't move until they let you make a move. Tell them exactly what you're doing. Like, don't
Have you ever been in any kind of situation like that where you've been scared for your life? With a cop?
That's like, yeah.
Like, who pulled you
That's
over?
being born black.
What transpired? So a cop pulls you over.
I mean, like, literally, it's been so many times. Like, it's just like I don't even know where to begin.
Is it like a normal conversation or like not at all?
It is interesting because when you do the talk, here's the thing that like basically they're sizing you up for, a thing of that. They're trying to size it up enough of like, if they kill you, is there anyone around who's educated enough to actually go and be able to find out what happened and actually prosecute you? And so if you drop enough hints like, oh, my father's a lawyer, or oh, my dad at the time, I get pulled over when I was on a military base, like speeding one time like that. Oh, my dad's base commander, or I think because my dad was in the army, so I think that. So all of a sudden, talking that and just like dropping the right hints of letting people know that like your family was like educated, smart, would be looking for you if something happens to you, and looking to prosecute whoever did something if someone did to you, or like thing. That is how you learn to avoid those situations about going and talking about it. And so those are little subtle things between like wherever my dad's went in his career that I would go and drop those type of things so I could try and stay out of trouble if I was like, or speeding or just, sometimes just like, I'm not the first person who's probably ever been pulled over speeding, but, like definitely there's people who like, funny enough, I was in New York and I was going to meet a friend and I was riding my motorcycle and the cop pulled me over and I wasn't even speeding. I was, honestly, I think they just recognized I was black and on a bike, and it was like, I think it was just straight profiling. Straight up. Like, they like fire up the sirens, I'd pull over, I had my registration, I had my license, thing of that. And the first thing the guy asked me was just like, this your bike? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, how'd you pay for this bike? Like, how did I pay for this bike? Cash and a loan like a normal person? Like, what does that mean? Like, what are you doing? Where are you going? Like, doesn't matter. But you don't say that because
Right.
You're just like, I'm going to the hotel over here where I'm going to go meet my friend who's waiting for me. That's how you answer that, because all of a sudden if you don't show up and the next week the person knows you're trying to get somewhere, they're not going to detain you and look into the trouble there. So that's how you have to go about trying to avoid those situations. Oh yeah, here's my license, thing like that. Like, oh, what are you guys doing? Oh, that's funny. Where'd you go to school? Oh, my dad's a lawyer, kind of went there, and blah, blah, blah. So you just work it into, so those people realize like, we could basically fuck with this guy, but probably it might bring more trouble onto us than it's worth. So what we'll do is we'll pick the person who maybe doesn't speak as eloquently, who doesn't have as many people looking for him, who could disappear. That's the dude. And like, that's honestly where I think they like messed up and like that. Those people thought George Floyd was a nobody. They thought he was a nobody. And honestly, the thing that brought the heat about it is that he was Steven's friend from Houston,
Right.
the basketball player.
Right.
Like that.
Saw that interview.
And so all of a sudden, like, when your best friend gets killed and you brought heat and you've got a show on Showtime and you've got all this press and you've got millions of followers, all of a sudden they're like,
Not to mention, the white cop and George Floyd worked at the same nightclub together. Think about that. Like, that is so sobering that they have crossed paths multiple times, maybe even knew each other somewhat well, and yet here he is, knee on his neck. Like,
they thought they were going to get away with it. And like, literally, probably, I say again, probably if he wasn't like that basketball player's friend, it probably would not have brought as much attention to it as quickly,
that video is sobering though. Thank God for video. I know this has been happening for hundreds of years, but now it's being filmed, and so now we can see it with our own eyes, and that helps bring justice.